Do you ever feel like when you pick up your guitar that your mind just goes blank and you forget all the songs that you've been working on or maybe the scales that you've been practicing? Try this instead. Next time you pick up your guitar, just play an easy chord that you know and then just add some cool tricks or riffs to it. And so if you know how to play an E minor chord, I'm gonna show you 5 tricks that you can add to it. They're gonna make you sound awesome, even if you're just a beginner. Now I'm gonna show some variations for more advanced players as well. Let's see how many of these you know. Let's jump right in. The first trick I want to show you is how you can play an E minor chord, but with harmonics, like this. Now, one of the coolest things about E minor is that it's almost all the open strings. So just playing the top 3 open strings by itself, that is an E minor triad. So if we take the 12th fret and we play those as harmonics, this is also an E minor chord. So to play a harmonic, what you want to do is just barely touch the 12th fret exactly above the fret. If you look from above, you can see it's right on top of the fret. Try to time it so where as soon as you pluck, you take your finger right off. That helps it sustain longer. If you want to do multiple strings, you have to do the same thing, but across 3 strings. So like this. Now, as soon as you play it again, try to lift your finger off. Just like that. The easiest spot to do it is at the 12th fret, but you can also do the same trick at the 5th fret. And that gives you 2 octaves above this. So you have this octave, the next octave up, and then this, the next octave above that. The 5th fret is a little bit harder to get to sound great. You have to have really perfect placement, and it helps to really pluck a little bit harder than you normally would. And you have to release the left hand at the right time also. Now, if those are too easy for you, check this one out too. This is called a pop harmonic. Sometimes people also call this tapping. If you tap really quickly at that exact right spot at the 12th fret, it'll make that harmonic sound. And this is a cool thing to maybe do if you don't have time to get your hand all the way up here, but you want to play some of those notes. You practice doing that like this. When you're first getting going on this, it might help to use the side part of your finger like this, because this is a bonier part of your finger, and so it'll have more attack on the strings. It's an easier way to do it. It sounds great and it's fun to do. All right, number 2 is gonna be hammer-ons and pull-offs. I'm gonna show you a bunch of different places you can hammer on or pull off around this E minor chord. The very first place we wanna start is hammering on both fingers at the same time. This is a really great place to start, but you can also just hammer on each individual finger like this. But how about this, using the minor pentatonic to pull off? Now remember, when you do this, a hammer-on is where you go up, and then a pull-off is where you go down, and then a trill is where you do both. A great way to practice it is to play the chord, and then like a little riff of hammer-on, pull-offs, trills, and then back to the chord, almost like a call and response. Something like this. Start with the chord, then hammer on, then pull off, then try trill, then a longer riff. It's a lot of fun. All right, number 3 is something I call scale plus pops. What we're doing is going up the scale on the D string, the E minor scale, and then popping our index finger on the open strings, which is an E minor triad, as we learned from before. All you need to know is what is the E minor scale starting on the D string, so you can follow this chart on the screen. And notice also I'm skipping around between notes. Get creative with it. Play an E minor chord and jump up. Play around with it. If you play with the scale, all the notes are going to sound cool. Now you can also play around with different energy levels by just popping a single string instead. Another very similar idea is playing around with the E minor scale up the first string instead, something like this. I'm doing the same thing, applying a right hand pattern. And then just with one finger playing around up and down the E minor scale. And if that's too easy for you, you can try adding pull-offs like this. All right, number 4 is gonna be cool voicings that you can play. These are easy voicings. And that just means it's different E minor chords that are more colorful. Like instead of this, you can play this. Or this one. Or this one. Or these. Let's start off with these 3. First, here's your regular E minor. If you just take these 2 fingers and then move them up to the 5th fret, now you've got an E minor 7. And then if you go up 2 more frets, now in the 7th position, this is like an E minor sus4, or just an E sus4. And this sounds really great resolving back to E minor. So remember those 3 as kind of like a grouping. The next 2 will also use the same fingering, and this is my favorite one. First finger on the 2nd fret of the A string. Any other finger, I'm using my pinky on the 4th fret of the D string, and that gives you a minor 9 voicing. I think the best way to play this voicing is to do slow arpeggios like that. If you just strum the whole thing, it still sounds great and it's still usable, but it's a lot more haunting sounding if you go, or in reverse. If you just take this shape that you had with your fingers and slide it up to the 7th fret, now you're in an E minor again. So these 2 voicings, E minor and E minor 9, they sound great and have this really cool, very emotional sound to them. Next, there's some easy grips that you can play just in this open position, just adding one other finger. If you take this grip and then put your pinky down on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string, it's an E minor 7. Now if you just go down 1 fret from there to the 2nd fret of the 2nd string, this is E minor 6. Those 2 chords sound great with each other. And if you take a very similar grip, but move those fingers to the 1st string, now you have this. This is an E minor. And then when you go to the 2nd fret, it's E minor 9 again. And they sound great together too. So try mixing around all these different voicings and coming up with your own creative phrase. Maybe something like this. Number 5 is going to be chord pairs. What chords pair well with E minor? And just to make this really easy, here's a chart with the chords in the key of E minor. But I want to highlight a couple of variations that are going to be great for beginners because they just use 2 fingers. If we take a look at the E minor chord with these 2 fingers, here's a couple options that you can play. Instead of C, you can play this C major 7. The C major 7 is just these 2 fingers, 2nd and 1st finger, on the 3rd and 2nd frets of the A and D strings. This is regular C major and this is C major 7. It sounds really nice going to E minor. Second is a variation on a G chord called G6. And that's where we just play 2 fingers, 3rd fret of the 6th string, 2nd fret of the 5th string. The rest are open. And it sounds really nice with E minor too. So these 3 chords sound great with E minor, especially for beginners because they're just 2 fingers. You can use this chart just to pick other chords to use. It'll help with your writing if you know which chords are going to go well with E minor without having to guess around. Eventually, it's something that you should just memorize and know off the top of your head. But since I started this chord trick series, remember you can use chord tricks from the other chords as well. For example, going E minor to A minor, you could do E minor to A minor chord tricks. Same thing with E minor to D, or E minor to B7. And And sometimes that can be a little bit more fun than just strumming the chords back and forth. As a bonus for FG members, let's add these two waterfall style riffs.